My name is Priyanka Sharma. Let's head straight into the news development that WION has been tracking closely. Now, despite the heightened tensions between India and China, the Indian Army has now put out a strong statement, and it has exposed China's sham yet again. And it has claimed that, well, China on one hand claimed that India fired warning shots along the LAC. The Indian Army has denied these reports outright. The Indian Army said that PLA troops were attempting to close in on the forward positions, and the Army further said that PLA fired shots into the air to intimidate their own soldiers. Now, with me is Mr. Brahma Chelani, a professor of strategic studies at the Center for Policy Research, who is joining us live. Now, Mr. Chelani, I'd like to continue our discussion. As we know, a strong statement has been put out by the Indian Army rebutting China's claims, and it clearly states that at no stage has the Indian Army transgressed across the LAC or resorted to any use of aggressive means, including firing. So give us your analysis of the situation at the border as of now.
Even the earlier episode that led to India occupying certain heights in the Chushul sector occurred because of Chinese provocations and Chinese attempt to intrude into Indian territory, or at least intrude into territory that was vacant. It was these were strategic heights that the PLA sought to intrude into, prompting India to preemptively occupy those heights. Those heights are well into the Indian side of the LAC.
Right.
So the latest incident appears to be a consequence of the earlier episode, the early confrontation, because the Chinese sought to enter and dislodge the Indians from one of the heights. That's how the latest confrontation happened. And I think the fact that the Indians managed to occupy important strategic heights to preempt the PLA from invading and occupying them has led to a lot of soul searching in the PLA. And according to US intelligence, the high command of the PLA has pulled up the local military commander for having allowed the Indians to grab those heights. So the PLA is now seeking to find ways to at least save face or at least occupy some of the heights that the Indians have seized.
Right. Right. Now, another question that I have for you, that the Indian side has clearly stated that it is committed to disengagement while all provocative attempts are being made by China right before a high-level diplomatic meeting gets underway between the foreign ministers of the two nations. So where are diplomatic talks headed for now?
It's a good question. The defense ministers met, and that was the highest level meeting between the two countries since the Chinese incursions began in April. That meeting did not yield any tangible results. Now, there's a lot of expectation that the foreign ministers meeting on the 10th might be able to deliver a breakthrough. But given the hardline position of China and the kind of provocative statements that are being issued, including by its own foreign ministry. For example, the foreign ministry in Beijing yesterday made a very provocative statement on Arunachal Pradesh,
right,
where 5 Arunachalis have been abducted by the PLA, and India has sought information from the PLA about these 5 missing Indians. And in response, the foreign ministry of China yesterday said that China does not recognize Arunachal Pradesh, it's actually South Tibet, and that it has no information to give to the Indians on the missing Indians. So that kind of a statement coming as it did just before the Moscow meeting of the foreign ministers did not augur well and does not raise hopes of a breakthrough.
Right. Mr. Jilani, stay with us. We'll come back to you for more questions. Joining us now is also our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibil, for more. Now, Siddhant, the big story this hour, of course, is the Indian Army's strong statement. Now, India has clearly accused China of trying to close in on Indian positions and firing shots and also misleading the domestic and international audiences with its claims. So tell us a little bit more about this strong statement coming in from the Indian Army.
Well, it's a statement on expected lines, a strong rebuttal by the Indian Army. And of course, it describes what actually transpired at the line of actual control on Monday, because the Chinese are claiming that India crossed LAC, but the Indian side has rebutted that, saying that the Chinese was trying to close in on the situation on a particular location. And then, of course, they fired the shots. But one thing is for clear, that shots were fired at the line of actual control, and this is something of a very serious concern, given the fact that over 40 years hasn't seen any developments like shots being fired. But largely we know now the focus is on the next statement that is likely or expected to be issued, because in about 1 hour's time the Chinese Foreign Ministry daily briefing will take place, and there will be of course questions on the developments, and do expect the Chinese side coming up with their own concocted allegations. So by and large it looks like a series of statements which are going to come from Delhi and Beijing, but largely focus is also on negotiation diplomacy, as we have been telling our audiences that how the Indian Foreign Minister has left for Russia for the SCO Foreign Ministers meeting, and there could be an expected meeting with his Chinese counterpart.
Right. Now coming back to you, Mr. Jilani, weighing on this aspect, you pointed out a very significant aspect about China's claims, saying that China is attempting to mislead global audiences at a time when there is a harsh critique of China with respect to the coronavirus pandemic. So tell us more about this.
China is facing an international backlash, and that backlash is in response to Xi Jinping's expansionism, and the expansionism is of two kinds. One is the military expansionism that we are seeing in the Himalayas in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, also in relation to Hong Kong and Taiwan. And the second type of expansionism is the economic expansionism that China has waged increasingly in recent years. So there is an international backlash that the Xi Jinping regime is now facing, and that has led to questions within China about China's capacity to continue to rise in a major way, because China's rise happened over the years because of a propitious international environment. The stars were aligned in such a way that they favored China's rise. The US, in fact, aided China's rise in a very active manner. It helped China emerge as an export juggernaut. But today the situation has changed and is changing quite rapidly. And this has forced Xi Jinping in his latest speech to call for a reorientation of the Chinese economy. He is suggesting that the Chinese economy be retooled and become less dependent on exports on foreign markets. So this is just one example of how an international backlash is forcing Xi Jinping to reorient Chinese policies. Also, we saw recently, a few days ago, in fact, on 29th of August, that Xi Jinping convened a very high-powered meeting on Tibet, and he ended that two-day meeting by making some very provocative statements, including saying that we need to ensure that Tibet becomes an impregnable fortress against separatism, and that securing the border with India should be a priority. Securing the border with India should be a priority. That underscored the hardline approach of Beijing toward India. And I think that whatever happens in the Moscow meeting between Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart, the fact is that even if the current tensions are diffused to some extent, India is going to face a increasingly hostile China in the months and years to come. So for India, this is going to be an important challenge.
Right. Now, coming back to you, Siddhant, I'd like you to weigh in on this as well, since you've been covering this story about the border standoff since it broke out. Tell us a little bit about the global reactions on the matter. Do we see the West supporting India, given its harsh stand against China?
Well, I do expect a reaction coming very soon, perhaps from Russia, but by and large, we have seen reactions coming in. In fact, over the weekend, the US President Donald Trump called the situation as nasty, and we know that the French defense minister is expected to visit. She will come to India later this week on 10th, with a huge delegation to be part of the Rafale induction ceremony in Ambala. She's going to have bilaterals with the Indian defense minister and the Indian NSA Ajit Doval. Remember, the French defense minister was among the first defense ministers to write to the Indian defense minister after the Galwan incident, talking about it and, of course, condoling it. But by and large, we have seen a strong support by the West for New Delhi, especially emergence of the alliance of democracies. In fact, Quad is something that everyone is now looking forward to. India has already confirmed that it is going to hold Quad. So, by and large, new permutations and combinations are emerging amidst a very fast-changing world.
Absolutely. All right, Siddhant, stay with us. We'll just take a quick break on this news bulletin and we'll come back with all the updates on this breaking story. Thank you.